When you want to research a group of unrelated yet connected persons, what tools do you use? Join me as I explain why I started with a spreadsheet to conduct genealogy research for men who served in the same military unit as my ancestor. Howdy, welcome back to Family History Fanatics. If you're new here, I'm Devin Noel Lee, and today we're diving into the reality of genealogy research beyond tutorials and tips. The first step with any genealogy research project is to define your research question. Now, here's where I'll admit to making my first mistake in my eagerness to research the men who served around William James Townsend. Instead of really thinking through the project and setting things up clearly, I thought, there's this really cool record set. Perhaps I can review these records and see what I can gather. Did the same man treat others in William's unit? How did they fare? Did the same people serve as witnesses for pension records for William and other members of his unit? So initially, I created a spreadsheet based on approved pension applications in the NARA record files. My initial spreadsheet gathered the following information: the man's name, the company he was in, a link to the pension on the NARA, war status. And then this column was he injured? Did he die? Did he mustered out? That kind of war status. Any notes? Witnesses, because again, I wanted to compare, are these being repetitive witnesses? I wanted to know some details of the injury or death, the sources that apply to this pension application. Thankfully, creating this spreadsheet took only about a day's worth of work. However, it's not a traditional research log. Notice I'm not trying to gather evidence to prove relationships or identity, but instead I want to collect data about individuals to get a better understanding of the group. But yet I have links to retrace my steps if I need to revisit the source of the data. So let me know in the comments, what would you call a spreadsheet like this? So far, I'm leaning towards research file / to-do list. Now, while it'd be really fun to explore the pension files, I felt a prompting that this was not the direction I wanted to go down at this time. Since so few of the Ohio 133rd pension records are online, maybe I should preserve what I gathered after a day in this research log, and then at some future date when my son has graduated high school and I've got all the time in the world to work on genealogy, I could research the pension records and answer the questions I have that are related to pension record filings and so forth. And maybe, just maybe, by then more of the records will be online, or I will go to the National Archives and just focus on the 133rd. So instead, I paused and started to think, okay, what do I really want to know? What will really help me understand who William served with? And ultimately, what can I discover in the shortest amount of time? Because I have so many other projects I need to accomplish. I can't just research the 133rd and become this expert in the 133rd and never write the story about William, because that's a ridiculous tangent, right? So again, the pension research is going to have to wait for a while. I'm going to try to move forward. But before we continue, have you ever found a new record collection and started exploring it only to realize that you need to stop and reset your goals? I really want to know if I'm alone in getting lost in rabbit trails or not. Let me know in the comment section. So I remembered, once again, I keep saying this again and again, the first step with a genealogy research project is to define your research question. So now I need to go back and look at my initial research question. It was, who were the men William James Townsend served with during the Civil War? The question is supposed to add social context to the biography I'm writing about my ancestor William. But notice how I'm asking a research question and it's really too vague. And yet it's still limited or bound by the need to gather information that could help me write a better story about William and his military service. So the next step is to ask what elements might help me understand the types of men who William served with so I can set the stage of his military service. So I need to rearrange my spreadsheet with the following columns. Notice I initially started out with a big mistake. I was eager to go in this direction, but stop, reset. Here's what we're going to do. So I'm going to do last name and first name, company, rank, age, and then I'm going to calculate the birth year because many records are based on a birth year and it's easy to research that rather than use an age. And so I'm just going to use a formula. 1864 minus by the age should give me the approximate birth year. These initial pieces of data start the process of differentiating the men in William's regiment. If two men have the same name in the same regiment, their company, and so forth, the age might provide clues to how to keep them separate. Now, the next column is going to be their death date and death location. Part of the story of the military unit includes the death during the service, but this information is often easily obtained for those who died during a battle or from illness while they're enlisted. And it's also going to give me context when I talk about William's illness and how he survived by telling me the survival rate of members of William's units who contracted the same disease that he had. So this date of battle is going to be date of death is going to be very beneficial for me. Since my ancestor came home blind, that was William, and recovering from another injury, I want to know how unusual was it for William to live another 26 years before his death. So again, death dates and locations are going to be very helpful. Actually, let's talk on location. That can help me know migration patterns of men in his unit after the war. How many stayed near the same home where they enlisted? Is it possible that these men started helping each other in their pension claim process? So death date and location is going to be helpful. The next piece of information in the next column was going to be residence in 1864. As much as possible, I'd like to know whether William served with men from his village, his county, his state, his country. I know he served with his brother, but were there other familiar faces in that unit? Because that's going to really make a difference in the cohesiveness, potentially, than having all these people from different groups somehow trying to form an alliance for 100 days. But if you're serving with your neighbors or familiar faces, that can make that cohesion and hopefully go a little bit better. The next thing I wanted to know is just kind of a human interest part is, of the men who served with William, what were their marital status and how many kids do these men have? Adds context to the people he served with, because if it's a bunch of single men, they're likely going to be acting differently than if they're balanced by men who are like, I'm here for 100 days, but I really want to get back to my wife and my children. So that was something I thought would be beneficial. Because I'm rearranging this spreadsheet, I'm going to save the pension link, any pension information, details of injuries, and the pension witness. And I'm just going to save these in the column. And eventually what I will do, I'll give you a little spoiler alert, is I wound up hiding those columns so that they would stay together with the information as I sorted things and moved it around. But I wasn't distracted by the pension information. But since I had already gathered it, I didn't want to toss it out completely. So I just left those details. The other thing I wanted to add was, again, how much experience did this unit have when they left on their 100 days of service? So if I discovered unit names for men, I would put that information in this column and I can start to see how many men served previously prior to William's unit being put together. I had a column for biography notes. Whenever I discover a biological note worth remembering that I don't have a column for it, I could just put this in that file. Maybe I came up with the wife's name, possible relationship links between members of his unit or country of origin. I really hadn't decided how many other columns I was going to have, but I had this biographical notes column to put things in and then as I needed to separate this out or decided to separate it out, I could create a new column and just pull the information from that column. The final one is another notes column, but this wasn't biographically related. Sometimes I have thoughts or questions or discovering interesting tidbits when I'm researching, and so I needed a column for just those types of notes. So with this spreadsheet planned with intentionality now, I proceeded to fill the spreadsheet with the starting data. So what is the best source in order to get all the men in the unit so then I can start getting the biographical details? I decided I needed a list of everybody who served in Company K, and then later I expanded it to the regiment. And so there are numerous Civil War themed genealogy classes, and I knew about the soldiers and sailors database on the NARA website. But after I did a search for the 133rd, filtering to Ohio and then infantry, I have some names, but I really just wanted a list. I didn't want to have to do some funky data mining or whatever. I just wanted to copy a list and stick it into a spreadsheet. And that's when I discovered the official roster of the soldiers of the state of Ohio in the War of the Rebellion, and then the dates. Now, I knew of this source actually because when I researched William in the first place and then finally discovered that his brother was Milby, and it created this whole inferential genealogy case to find out that they were actually connected because they had no prior record to say that they were connected. I had used this roster, so I decided, okay, let me get a PDF of this roster and turn it into a spreadsheet. Now, there's many ways to accomplish this, and if you have a favorite way, this is a great opportunity to tell me that in the comments section. All I did was I simply highlighted each page from the Internet Archive version of the roster, and then I copied it into Google Sheets. You can use any spreadsheet for the program. Google Sheet is just my preferred program as it's easiest for me to share across multiple computers at home when I go to the FamilySearch Center or anyone else is interested in my research, they can access it. So it's just an easier program for me, but the program really doesn't matter as much as I wanted a digital spreadsheet. When I copied it into the spreadsheet, the data didn't look like the table in its original source. So rather than seeking out how to make this process go quickly, I did the following. So first, I sorted by column A and manually deleted anything that wasn't a name. Then I split the name columns using this feature of split text in a cell into multiple columns, and I used the comma as the delineating factor. It didn't work perfectly, so I had to do some more manual adjustments, but finally I had the names into given name and surname. Then I compared my spreadsheet to the original list and added details to the columns above because I needed to focus on the names. Once I got the names, then I can add a rank and the ages just because the copy and paste didn't work. So if you have any tips on how that could have been done a little bit easier, I'd love to hear it in the comments section below. So when I did the comparison, I did a split screen. I had one screen and I split it into two, and I had the roster from the Internet Archive on one screen, and I had the Google Sheets in the second column, and then I would manually compare and get everything corrected. I tried to do an auto-populate option whenever possible, so especially for when I got to the names of the privates from here to here, those were all privates. So then I would put in private once, and then I would do an auto population for that. Using the remarks on the roster, sometimes the remarks would say things like, this person died on this date in this place. And so then I could add those details into the death date and death location fields. There were also some comments such as rejected, sent home, discharge, and so forth. And I put those details in that notes field because their discharge date is going to be different than everybody else because they didn't serve the full time. There were some notes in the roster about transferring between units or promotions or reduction in rank. If there was a transfer between units, I would put that information in additional service. I thought that was the best place for that. If it was a change of rank, then I would put that in the note field. So with the seat information in place, it was time to consult the other sources and dig deeper than what a roster provides about the men who served. I did ask if you had any other tools that could have helped get this initial seed information into the spreadsheet. I will admit that after creating the spreadsheet, I had considered, oh, wait, what if this information could have been better handled using AR and OCR cleaning technology? If you have used AR and cleaned up OCR scans, let me know what you did in the comment section. So once I have the roster in the spreadsheet, the next thing I decided to do was consult the pension file index. So in the previous video, I had consulted the scanned pension files that are on the NARA, but not all of the complete files are available online. But the pension index that gets you the code, so then you can go to the NARA physical location and then get a copy or hire somebody to do that for you. So I decided, all right, I'm going to look at these pension cards and I'm going to put all this information into the spreadsheet. The reason why I consulted the pension index is my experience with William Townsend and Milby Townsend and ordering their pension files is a number of these index gave me some differentiating details so that I can use it to further research the people in this unit, because there's not a lot to go on based on the roster. For instance, the name of a widow, the name of some other beneficiary. That was the version of the index cards that I've seen on Ancestry and also on FamilySearch. Spoiler alert, there's another version of the pension index, and I'm going to tell you about that here in a moment. And it gave some additional differentiating information. What I found in the pension index file that was also helpful is if they served in the 133rd and then part of their claim they acknowledged a different branch of service they also were part of, it would be on this index card. If they filed of a completely different regiment, it won't be on the card that they also were part of 133rd. There wasn't a way to really connect all these details unless the man put that on his application. So I extracted additional units of service and put that into the column they had on my spreadsheet. I also decided in the pension information column, I put the date of the application and the location for the man. And any of the beneficiaries who received it after he passed, I would put their date of application and location in the field as well. Because what happens is that gave me clue of migration. And that would help me know, okay, it's not this William Smith who stayed in Ohio. He moved out to Kansas. And so if I find records for a veteran over in Kansas, a good chance it's my ancestor. So those were really good clues to help me further research, because again, I just have an age, a rank, and a date of service from the roster. Now, I told you to pay attention. There was another pension index file. Over on fold 3, it has a different version of the pension files. There's actually 2 different versions of this pension index record. The one that's on fold 3 is structured a little differently, and it has the added benefit of having the death date and place on many of the pension records that the Ancestry and FamilySearch version did not have. That definitely gave me clues that I needed to further research these individuals, because I have a birth year, I have the service date that they were in, and now I have a death date, as well as if they have a spouse or a minor child or a parental name obtaining that pension after they passed. Great resource. And if you haven't used it, and or if you didn't know there were 2 pension indexes, make sure you check out both. Now, remember, I initially put the wife's name and the location of the application in the biography column, but later I separated that out into separate columns. If I couldn't find a man in either of the pension records, and I would put a note in the notes column that says not in T288 or T289. I think eventually I moved it over to the pension information column and put it there because it just made more sense. I still want to explore the reasons why men didn't apply if they were alive. I mean, if they passed away and they didn't have any survivors, that made sense. But if they lived long past when pensions were put forth, I want to know why the men's didn't apply for or receive a pension. So if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Now, here's something. By going through the Ancestry and the Fold 3 versions, I was surprised to find a few men listed in the 133rd applying for the pension, but their names did not appear on the roster. For those individuals, I added them to my spreadsheet and then added a note, does not appear on roster. I want to know why they're not on the roster, and yet they get a pension under the 133rd. Now, some of them actually didn't get a pension, so maybe they applied under the 133rd and they were rejected. But if they applied and received it, maybe someday when the pension is online, we'll figure out why they weren't on the roster. I'm not sure. But here's a pro tip, a lesson learned. We need to consult more than one military source to find out information about our ancestor and whether they served or not. If they're not on the roster, maybe they were missed for some reason and they're over in the pension record. So be sure to consult a number of different records before you conclude that someone didn't serve. Now, here is a little tidbit. Working 2 full days, 8-hour days, because my kids were on break and we weren't traveling. It was January. It took about 2 days for me to compile the roster data and expand the spreadsheet with the details from the pension files. Some things I've learned about pension index research that I want to highlight once again. The Ancestry and the Fold 3 pension index are similar, but not the same. They have different information, so you'll want to look at both and capture that before you seek out further pension files. If I had to search pension records over again, I actually would have started with the Fold 3 pension index, not the Ancestry pension index. And the reason is the Fold 3 version is arranged so that you can first filter by state, then by regiment, then by company, and then all the names are organized alphabetically by surname and then first name. And so you can see everybody in that index super organized and go through the names. Over on Ancestry, I didn't find that to be so easy to go through the unit. I had to do a search where it said, I would type in 133rd in the regiment field on the Ancestry search page. That helped me get most people, but I'm sure I skipped others because one of the things that's problematic over on Ancestry is there are a lot. Oh my gosh, there are so many transcription errors in the pension file. It's very, very difficult to search. Names are misspelled, units are incorrect, dates are, filing dates are wrong, on and on and on and on and on. But additionally, this is a not Ancestry problem. The inconsistency in identifying the regiment name, that's not a problem that Ancestry necessarily can solve unless they want to do a standardized one, a unit name. But the reference can be a hot mess. And so the Fold 3 version was easier because it was just arranged, so easy to flow through the entire group and capture everybody. And then you could go to Ancestry and pick up the second version, the alternate version of the pension index, and get a couple more details that weren't in the Fold 3 version. But you at least know, okay, I'm pretty sure all of these people have pension indexes. Let's see if we can find them, even though it becomes a little more tricky. So summarize, short version. If you're going to do a big project for a Civil War unit, I would start with the pension index records over on Fold 3. The other nice thing is that if I didn't, if you were building a tree over on Ancestry, Fold 3 has an easy share button from Fold 3 over to Ancestry, and then you can click it to a profile on the Ancestry family tree. I didn't take advantage of it, and we'll talk about that later. If I forget, reminds me to discuss it. Something else I learned was I vaguely knew that non-widows could file for pensions. But when I saw minors, mothers, and fathers in the index files, I learned more about this collection and its clues. So then I wanted to start saying, oh, what else can this tell me? If a mother's filing, so this person was a single individual or their wife had passed away and the mother's dependent. But the father's one, that was kind of fascinating. It didn't happen often, but when the father got a pension, that's giving you clues about this family structure. And so I want to do some more research on that. I would love to know why a father would receive a pension after the death of their veteran son. With a fairly solid foundation of my spreadsheet and a clearer research project in mind, I can now go forth and investigate additional biographical questions, but that will be discussed in the next video. But before we go to that next video, I'm sure you're asking the question, Devin, why did you start with a spreadsheet? Why didn't you start with a traditional genealogy database for these men? I mean, because you just alluded, if I would have been building a family tree, I could send the Fold 3 record over to the database. Well, let me tell you my thought process, okay? Firstly, these men aren't necessarily connected in a familial relationship way, but rather men who served together in war. Next, I lack the skills to make custom reports in Roots Magic or Family Tree Maker that would show only one data set rather than everything in a profile. For instance, how do I create a report of men who have a resident fact of 1860 based on this census year before the war, but I don't want to see the other residents' facts? I haven't been able to solve that problem. I couldn't solve that problem then. And so I couldn't then create that report and put those fields in my spreadsheet and merge the things together. I would have to do a whole lot of extraction work. And sure, there's formulas to do it, but it was just such a problem. I decided, hey, ultimately I want this stuff in a spreadsheet so that I can filter details and start grouping things and analyze people as a group with common factors. And since I couldn't make those reports do what I wanted, I started with a spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet I've kind of talked about, my goal is to do this data analysis on a group, right? It's difficult to see biographical patterns. So how many people are originally from England and are now serving in this war? How many people are from Virginia and then came over? How many people in 1860 didn't even reside in Ohio, but now they're part of an Ohio troop, and starting to consider why would they have done that? It's very difficult to see these patterns when all of the details are in a family tree rather than a spreadsheet. So now you're starting to see my thought process of why let's create a spreadsheet. The other thing I can do is, sure, I can filter by columns and I can do counts, but I can start making really cool charts. And those charts can better help me understand the group. I could do a chart based on age range, what percentage of the people are under 18, between 19 and 30, 30 and 40, and so forth. I could do something similar, the residents in 1860, the place of birth, and so forth. By having everything in a spreadsheet, I can filter and understand people better, but then create those charts. Other things, remember, I wanted to see the longevity factors, how soon people died after the war. Other filters I could do with how quickly did people marry after they got back. I wasn't really searching the baby boom, but that could be another question that I would answer, and having a spreadsheet. It's an ideal way for me to view and analyze the type of information I'm after, because my ultimate goal is adding more social history to the story of William James Townsend, who served in the Civil War. Now, if you have research that you can convert to a spreadsheet, you can do some in-depth analysis. So the question remains in this series, did I do well to start with the spreadsheet, or should I have gathered research differently and then created a spreadsheet based on that? I would love for you to share your thoughts below. No thoughts are necessarily wrong as long as you're kind and civil in how you discuss the problem. So this is Family History Fanatics reminding you that if family history isn't fun, you're doing it wrong, and I will see you in the next video. Bye now.